So thank you, Dan, and thank you to your conference committee for your kind invitation. Last night's very fine dinner, very fine speech, your warm welcome, and of course some very fine singing. My wife is Welsh, so I am very familiar with this beautiful country and the warm welcome that awaits visitors here. So colleagues, it is an absolute pleasure to address you here in Wales, and in 3 dimensions for once, after 2 years of virtual meetings that I know that we have all enjoyed immensely. It's been so good to meet up with colleagues face to face, and it is so good not to have to ask somebody to unmute or indeed mute. Although I may actually miss that facility, I think. But we'll see how it goes. I'm grateful to local dental committees from all 4 corners that have joined us here today. And I think that reflects the gravity of the issues that I and others will be speaking on throughout this conference. The Minister, as you know, was set to address the conference. And sadly, just hours after the evidence that I gave in Westminster last month, her office explained that she would have to pull out, stressing urgent government business. And I think that's unfortunate at best. I think I share the view of this room, of Health Watch England, of a growing number of MPs from all parties, large swathes of the media, and millions of patients across the country, that dentistry today is urgent business. And it is doubly unfortunate because I, like many of you, have some key questions. Had the Minister or colleagues from the Department of NHS England been here, we would all be seeking clarity on those questions. So I hope you will indulge me because some of those questions underpin my update to you today. Where we have answers, I will share them with you. Where we don't, I hope you will share our collective frustration. Because what we are doing, both inside and outside of formal negotiations, is attempting to secure the best possible deal for the millions of patients that we treat and for you, the profession. And I'm not going to tell you that the glass is half full, and I'm not going to tell you that it's half empty. But what I will tell you are that the stakes are high, and the future of the NHS dental service is in serious doubt. And I think we all know that. I will be talking extensively about the current situation in England, but I am always conscious of the other 3 nations. Russell Gidney will be speaking with the Welsh CDO, Andrew Dickinson, later in the agenda, and colleagues have joined us for conference from Scotland and Northern Ireland, so welcome to you all. There are different approaches in all 4 nations. But we share very similar problems, with a shift away from NHS dentistry and a fundamentally underfunded service. So here's a simple question. Have we returned to business as normal? I might start with that question, because I know many of you would have been asking that as you received the IPC guidance a couple of weeks ago on the government website. And I think there's a simple answer to that question: no. Real burdens remain for practices. For any of you who have had a chance to read through the comms from NHS England, practices will continue to have to comply with much of the recent guidance, maintaining screening, triaging, separate pathways and approaches for patients with symptoms of respiratory infection, to name just some. New guidance places an emphasis on ensuring practices have adequate ventilation and PPE. However, as colleagues in England will know, and all of our private colleagues will attest, it's one thing for officials to place an emphasis here. It's quite another for government to offer anything in the way of meaningful support. But business as usual is not just about the hoops that we have to jump through. It's the fact that dentistry is still light years from where it was before March 2020. The steep drop-off in courses of treatment that you see there in March 2020, from 3.5 million courses of dentistry annually in England to below 2.5 million now. Over 43 million appointments lost in England alone. Oral health inequality set to widen between areas of deprivation and more prosperous postcodes. And a backlog that will frankly take years to clear, and that with a recruitment and retention crisis in NHS dentistry that has not been seen since the inception of the NHS in 1948. But where things are very much returning to business as usual is finance. And this, unfortunately, is going to feature across this update. We went into this pandemic operating on a budget lower in real terms than it was a decade ago. Lower in cash terms if you include government contributions. It would take an extra £880 million per year to restore resources to NHS dentistry at 2010 levels. But money is what's been driving the rush back to normality as government sees it. Normal targets driven by the Treasury. Because the Treasury sees that it has to fill the gap left by a collapse in patient charge revenue. State contributions that have fallen year on year have had to go in the other direction during the pandemic for the first time in a generation. Government has grown reliant on the patient charge revenue collected from, and I quote, free at the point of delivery NHS dental service. And pressure to bring back normality has underpinned the choices made across government, whether it's on targets or on the future direction of reform. Can we advance one? So why is government still talking about the £50 million package? Certainly were the minister here, I would be asking why the department keeps coming back to policy that many in our profession regarded as a PR stunt in the middle of the pandemic. It was a short-term fix, not a long-term strategy. We were told that if the 50 million was not completely spent, it would be impossible to justify additional long-term investment. Patent nonsense. And we said as much. And then they stopped repeating the line. And again. So the 50 million package, really a drop in the ocean based on recycled money and clawback. And we're still awaiting the full figures as to the uptake of that 50 million package. But what we do know is that the uptake was slight. It was much less than they anticipated. And again, it reflects the need for a real long-term commitment rather than a short-term fix. So patients and the profession, as I say, need urgent action, not empty slogans. I mean, what does levelling up dentistry even mean? I'm not sure. But sadly, that's what we're getting used to, as the pressure continues to build on government. Slogans and pledges, but no commitment to deliver long-term sustainable funding or reform outside the UDA. Whether it's widening inequality, charities stepping in where the NHS has failed, or the latest on the access crisis, the same phrases are being thrown back at us by government press officers. I would have liked to ask the Minister, if she were here, how she would respond to those specific demands for dental funding that meets the needs of all who wish to access NHS care, rather than the current 55% of the population that can, and why the continued reluctance to state the clear intent to move away from the discredited UDA system. Many of you will have seen the media around NHS dentistry hanging by a thread, which I think was highly effective. Dan touched on the Health Select Committee. Again, I think we had a very fair hearing. We were given a lot of time. We were allocated a lot of time. That committee definitely saw the urgency as to what was needed. But stepping back, I'm sure many colleagues here today would have liked a sense of whether the government feels it made the right calls since the first targets were imposed. And again, I think we can guess the response. But it certainly didn't feel like the right targets in practice. So we all know it's been a long haul and very challenging to dentists and teams. Everybody on my committee, on the executive, we know how difficult that's been. It's been a bruising period for our teams, and we're still counting the cost, and I don't think we know what the true cost will be. And to be frank, the imposition of an 85% target at Christmas during Omicron was beyond a joke. We never ceased to remind them that the joke was in bad taste and frankly not funny for most practices. Contrast that to the support offered to Scotland and Northern Ireland in terms of ventilation, handpiece funding, and significantly reduced targets that persist even now. Performance levels. So there was high levels of threshold achievement in 2020-21, but not in 2022, not this year. In March this year, 43% of practices were on track to reach the 85% target. So if you weren't on track in your practice, you were in a majority. In April, a significant deterioration in UDA performance. I think practitioners and practices were exhausted, and they'd made decisions. The average UDA delivery dipped to 61% of contracted UDAs in April. The retrospective reduction in that 85% target to 75% was much belated recognition of the futility of what they had set as a target. It was imposed by them. We never agreed it. We argued against it incessantly on your behalf. But now we have a 95% target, even more perverse. Again, we could hope for candour on where we're going in the next quarter, quarter two. But colleagues, I think you can hazard a guess. The data shows that what we've been saying for a long time, they're setting practices up to fail, and large numbers of practices are failing to meet their thresholds. These choices have come at a cost because, and I'll pick up on this later, it's already abundantly clear the government is set to reap what is sown when it comes to the workforce. A BDA survey of over 3,000 dentists showed that nearly half had reduced their NHS commitment. And 75% are likely to reduce their NHS commitment in the future. 75% are likely to reduce their NHS commitment in the future. So where next? That's the big question, isn't it? The language of quick wins emerged long ago from NHS England. We prefer the description marginal changes. They will be marginal, and they sure haven't been quick. So what of marginal changes? We are initially looking at modest, marginal changes to a current flawed UDA system. Changes that we expected to be with us by now are obviously not. April came and went. And I would not use the word reform for marginal changes. That would feel inaccurate, and I think it builds expectations. We are clear that those marginal changes will not reverse the exodus from and the current crisis in NHS dentistry. We need to move urgently to the much more important piece of work on non-UDA contract discussions. Nothing about marginal changes will come as much of a surprise in what they have wanted to discuss. Improving remuneration for high treatment need patients with multiple cavities and needs, improving remuneration for specific time-consuming clinical procedures, keeping dental resources in dentistry. Clawback is a perennial problem, and NHS England wish to make it easier to redistribute resources that would otherwise be lost to dentistry. Access, increasing the attractiveness of NHS dentistry. Skill mix. Prototypes used skill mix to varying degrees and the wider talents of their teams. NHS England are keen to facilitate that, but given that only 11% of registrants are therapists or hygienists, and a disproportionate number of those work in private practice, I don't feel that this will be a game changer at the present time, and it may be something that we come back to in the wider contract reform discussions. And as I have previously stated to GDPC, when the final proposals arrive, the final agreed proposals arrive from NHS England, they will be taken to GDPC first for consideration. So where's the ambition? Where's the government's ambition? I mean, given I've been around the table with senior officials from Department of Health and NHS England for probably more years than I care to remember, but certainly a number of years, this is the question that I find hardest to answer myself. Yes, we've had sound bites, but there remains no tangible evidence of desire to affect the scale of change that we think we need to see. A fundamental shift in the scale of urgency and ambition is what is required by patients and the profession. So a busy slide here, and you don't need to read all of the detail. I appreciate it's busy. But these were the NHS England's 6 aims. And beyond the marginal changes, the next phase should run to fundamental system reform. And the aims are there for all to see. But I would draw attention to item 6 on that list in red. Because however laudable the other 5 agenda items are on that list, improving access, addressing inequality, making prevention a reality, they will be impossible to deliver if they are predicated on an inadequate, standstill budget that frankly delivers care to 50% of the population. So the cogs are in motion. Something resembling formal negotiations is beginning on fundamental reform of the NHS dental service. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my 2 vice chairs, Vijay and Shiv, my executive, and the BDA staff, all of the BDA staff, but particularly Martin, Tom, Eleanor, and Ashley, who we work very closely with and have supported us terrifically. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the 100 or more prototype practices who effectively were abandoned and thrown under the bus in March and returned to the UDA system. However, and again, my thanks to all of you at LDC Conference and LDC colleagues, we are quite clear about the signals that you send to us and the signals that you sent to me and my team at the last conference. Career progression, abandonment of the UDA treadmill, systems that support standards of care and prevention, and many more. But be reassured, each of those items remain in our minds as we approach negotiations. Your voice is heard and noted in all that we do. This is a tricky question. It's certainly withering on the vine, and the jury is out. NHS dentistry is, in my view, in intensive care, and the government resus team seem to be dragging their feet to resuscitate the patient before it's too late. And the answer to this fundamental question will essentially hinge on the choices that this government make in the year ahead. I told Jeremy Hunt and his Health Select Committee colleagues 10 days ago that I feared a slow death for this service. Or perhaps it won't be that slow given the data up in front of you. Yes, we've lost some 3,000 NHS dentists since lockdown, the direct result, in my view, of the choices made by governments over more than a decade. However, beneath the surface, there is a bigger shift taking place. Our survey suggests that for every dentist that is leaving the NHS, 10 dentists are reducing their commitment to the NHS by significant margins. And that is how this service will die, when there simply isn't the goodwill left to compensate for a broken system and chronic underfunding. It's plain to see the tectonic plates in this service are shifting. There's now an existential threat to the service if we don't design an attractive NHS system for professionals and soon. However, for the first time in over 15 years, there is a genuine negotiating process on NHS system reform, and we will not let this opportunity pass. Whether it's at the negotiating table or working with partners, politicians, or even the press, we will continue to spell out the human cost of inaction by government. So, conference, let me close by telling you again that I am genuinely disappointed that the Minister could not join us today. It's my desire to seek solutions, not confrontation. I'm a pragmatist and I'm a problem solver. Dentists are. And were she here today, I would have liked to have thanked her for the comments she made in January. Speaking to her own local radio station, she said, "Unless we deal with the contract, dentists are not going to feel valued for the work that they're doing, and they're not going to be properly paid either." She also said, "There is no doubt that unlike most of the NHS that's having record levels of funding, dentistry hasn't seen that same level of investment." In my view, the Minister accurately diagnosed the problem and offered a solution: contract and investment. In the year ahead, we will see if her government is ready and willing to do what needs to be done. But you have my word that we will not stop pushing for those solutions on your behalf. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sean. Is my mic audible there? Thank you, Sean. We've only got a fairly short amount of time for questions because we asked Sean to cover quite a lot for obvious reasons. There's been quite a lot going on. Sean, thanks very much for your talk. And it's not always easy being the bearer of bad news and not shooting the messenger. I mean, I can assure you that however bad things are, they'd have been a whole lot worse if it hadn't been for the hard work that Sean and his colleagues at GDPC have done. Would anyone like to ask some questions? We've got two mics. So there's one over there and there's one over there, just a couple of meters there in from the speakers, the loudspeakers, that is. So if anyone would like to come to the mic and ask Sean a question, you can. Don't be shy. It was a comprehensive talk then, Sean. I think that's a vote of confidence. I think that's superb. Oh, yes, please.
The Bedfordshire LDC Secretary. So Sean, as you just concluded with Maria's comment, so have you got a simple, because it does sound like she understands what the problem is, so is it too complicated why she can't actually answer or actually produce what she's saying?
I think they definitely get the problem. There's no doubt they understand that there is a I wouldn't use this word lightly. There is a crisis in many areas of the country. Not all areas, but there is a crisis in many areas, and it's getting worse. And we're talking about dental deserts and all that sort of thing. They understand the problem, and they understand and are starting to take notice of the problem because and it's an opportunity for me to thank all of you. The campaigns of letters from patients and professionals to MPs really pricks their attention. Then we've had several debates on dentistry in the House in the last 6 months. We've had the Select Committee. We've had 2 direct questions about dentistry at Prime Minister's Question Time. So the first thing to say is that it's very high profile. I mean, many of us are being contacted on a daily basis in terms of media. So they are well aware of the problem. Yeah, I think money is probably the issue. And I think the Treasury are very reluctant to move to a new system without, significant trialling and all the rest of it. And frankly, I personally feel, I know VJ and Shiv feel the same way, that I think it'll be too late. What worries me is that we will reach a point, and we talk about this, we may have reached a point where in many parts of the country we will never get back a comprehensive NHS dental service. I mean, we know towns that lost a quarter of their dentists, NHS dentists, in 1 year. Well, you can't do that for very long before there is effectively no NHS service for most of your population. So they absolutely get it. I think they're just really... It's a case of priorities, isn't it? And I think by constantly keeping the dental issue at people's fore of their minds, politicians' minds, in the end they've got to do something about it.
Sean, Tim Hogan,
Hi, Tim.
Chair of Kent LDC. Have you ever discussed with them the option of a core service? This is a motion coming up anyway.
Yeah.
Any, because then we could have the same, obviously same level of funding, better targeted. Yeah.
So we had a series of discussions last year around what a new system should try to address. And the problem is it's quite a long shopping list on their side. And you quite quickly get into, there's no more money. Well, if there's no more money, then there's no more room in the system for NHS dentists to deliver more care to more patients. And that's when you get into the discussion about core service. And we've not had a detailed discussion because they haven't really wanted to talk about that level of detail. But we've said to them, you can't have everything and more for the same. If you want more service, then it will require more money. And we've certainly had, and again, I don't want you to go away and think, it's all developed and not decided on or anything like that, just to be completely clear. But it is something that it's cropped up in discussions as to how they view it as how best to spend their budget.
Thanks very much. Last question now, then, please.
Stuart Eagle, North Tyne LDC. Any ideas when the radio silence will finish, when we're going to get some actual information from the Department of Health?
Sorry, when will the radio silence end?
When are we going to get any further information from the Department of Health?
Yeah, so I'm hopeful that we will have more information. I'm always loath to say, final announcement, because the system seems to take forever. But I would be hopeful that we would have that in the next couple of months. Okay, so it will be this year, one way or the other, and I'm hoping that it will be in the next couple of months. It's not going to be in the next couple of weeks, but yeah, we're hopefully heading towards a conclusion, one way or the other. Because what we want to do, we actually don't want to waste a lot more time on what we consider to be something that's fairly marginal. And again, I'm trying to manage everyone's expectations here. We need to move on to the next piece around moving away from the UDA system, which is just so widely discredited by, many dentists. I'm not saying all dentists, but many dentists.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sean. Yeah, thanks very much indeed. We haven't
Okay.
got time for any more questions. Sean will be around, I'm sure, to have an informal chat. He's a very approachable man. So please feel free to have a chat to him later on. Thanks very much again, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you.